This podcast is brought to you by Hoare Chartered Accountants. Hoare Chartered Accountants are based in Galway City and are a leading provider of audit, accountancy and taxation services. For more information, visit hoarecharteredaccountants.ie. You're welcome along to the Maroon and White pod. So on today's show, we have Andy Coen. Andy was previously manager of Craughwell, county final winning captain with Gort previously, and as well does a lot of work with Galway FM and Galway GATV throughout the club championship. So Andy will be giving his views on the club championship. But before Andy comes in, we've the latest edition of the Power Rankings to update across the senior B and intermediate hurling championships. So we'll start with the senior hurling championships, and there is a change this week. In first place are St. Thomas's. They've shown they haven't really went anywhere. They're up one place and in top spot at the minute. Even against Athenry, the performance Athenry gave was really impressive, but the way Thomas's fought back and were able to see it out and win by 3 points was very impressive at the weekend. The way the youngsters have come in there and getting Fintan Burke back on the pitch too at the weekend has been really impressive from St. Thomas's there, so they're in top spot. Clarenbridge, they're continuing their winning start to the championship, 3 from 3. Aran Island, really impressive for them at the weekend, and that's a big result for Clarenbridge to be directly now straight into a quarter final, 3 games away from a county final, and they do look like one of the form teams in the championship. So they're in second spot. In third spot and up one spot is Turlockmore. Even after their heavy defeat to Clarenbridge in round one, they've been able to regroup and get victories over Castlegare and Ardran at the weekend. So they've responded really well, and they'll be looking now to up it a few gears and go really far in this championship. So they're in third spot. Down 3 places is Loughrea. Probably just given against Craughwell, they did trail by 13 points during that second half. Now they did fight back and they only lost it by 4 in the end, which would be a big positive for Tommy Kelly to take. But I think there will be a few concerning aspects. But they'll want to get Darren Shaughnessy, Neil Keary, these players back on the pitch for them and get Loughrea closer to full strength. But they won't be hitting the panic buttons yet. They're still into the preliminary quarter final and there's still a long way to go in this championship. In fifth, Sarsfield's up one spot, and the main reason for that is when you look at who Sarsfields were without at the weekend, without Darren Marcy, without Paddy McCarthy, and without Alex Kinnear, who returned from injury but missed the weekend, and Joseph Cooney only came on. So it's really shown that Sarsfields have really built strength and depth this year, and they really look like they've learned from last year's quarter-final defeat to Captagal already. Ormore married there in sixth. They got their first defeat in the Senior Hurling Championship at the weekend to Tommy Larkins. Still competitive, and they had their house in order before the weekend. Only lost 19 points to 16, but just mainly the reason for Sarsfields when you consider who they were without and the result they got now. Ormore married still in directly into the quarter final, but they're in sixth place at the minute. Craughwell in seventh place, up 2 places. Now some people might look at this and say, how can Loughrea be ahead of Craughwell? But when you look at the Senior Hurling Championship, Loughrea have been thereabouts for the last few years. The big challenge for Craughwell, as good as the result was at the weekend, is going to be now, can they back it up and drive on and push on in this hurling championship? But what a result, and this could really be the springboard of Craughwell season if they can build on this one. In eighth place then, Tommy Larkins got that victory over Warren Murray, which sees them into the knockout stages, and even with Conor Gardner back, Kevin McHugh, like this Larkins team, when they are at full strength, they have a very good team, and Jason Flynn 7 points at the weekend. So they'll be very happy to get into knockout hurling now. In ninth place, in ninth place, Athenry, they're up 1 place. A huge performance for them against St. Thomas at the weekend, but 17 wise just costing them in the end in that one. But they've shown now that they're able to compete with the best teams in the Senior Hurling Championship after coming up from Senior B. So a big performance there from Athenry, and they're up 1 place. Castlegare, they're up 1 place in 10th place. They'll be happy enough, like, even I know when you look at Castlegare, but the heavy defeat in that game to Turlough. It was hard to know where this season was going to go, but they got a performance anyways against Clanbridge, and now they have a huge tie coming against Sarsfields. But the fact they've reacted and they didn't take another heavy defeat, that has to be somewhat of a positive. In 11th place, Captagal, they're down 4 places. Unfortunately, just really never got going and hit the heights of what they hit last year. But that's a lot to do with the group they're into. Like you're looking at the 3 teams that were in the group: Sarsfields, Ormore, Mary, and Tommy Larkins, all good teams. So just unfortunate that they didn't come out, but they will be disappointed considering what happened last year. Um, Mike Cullen, 12th place. What a turnaround for them against Gort. Like huge credit has to go to them again because particularly the last day against Thomas's, that was a difficult defeat, but they've responded and they're into knockout hurling, so they're up 4 places in 12th place. Clymer Daly just pipping their neighbours Kilkenny in that local derby, 117 to 116. Brian Burke and Brian Kincannon, the real standout performers there for Clymer Daly at the weekend. But look, Clymer Daly 3-8 against Loughrea, that was a difficult day for them, and as well losing to Craughwell as well in the group. So they've bounced back. Even you look at the league, they won the Division Two league title this year. So Clymer Daly now they're into knockout hurling, and they'll look to have a go after look more in that game. 14th Ardran down 3 places. It's just been an injury interrupted campaign for Francis O'Connor and his side, but they have to regroup now heading into the relegation. 15th Kilkenny down 2 places, just narrowly pipped by their neighbours Clymer Daly at the weekend, and 16th Gort in a winning position but couldn't see it out and lost to Mike Collins. They're down 2 places in 16th place on the bottom of the Senior Hurling Championship power rankings. If to look at the Senior B, then Hurling Championship rankings. First place at Haskell I can't argue. I don't think anyone could really with this at all. Have been the standout team. Have really blown every team out of the water they've came up against. And with Cathal Mannion hitting 50 points in 3 games, he's been such a standout performer for them. But as well as that, like Sean Blaheen, Luke Kennedy, Mark Kelly, there's been big performances for Haskell and they look at this current moment in time, the best team in the Senior B Hurling Championship, but an upset could easily happen in this. Killadee Leitrim up 1 place, got over Lee Meadows at the weekend, met it 3 from 3, late scores, be happy with the way they finished that, and they're straight into semi-final. Ballindreen up 1 place, defeated Teen Aberdeen by 6 points at the weekend, and 2 wins from 3. They've really built on last year, and Roy Lane there and Luke Prendergast, really impressive performers in attack. 4th place, Porty Pierce, just down 2 places. Could never really get this game back to the one-score game or bring it down the stretch against the Haskell Fona, but still they're into knockout hurling in the quarter-final stage of the Senior B Hurling Championship, and it's been 2 for 3 for them, so a big positive for them too. It's just been one defeat for them so far. Lee Meadows, 5th place. After losing the first day to Ballindreen, they got the victory over Teen Aberdeen, and just last 5 minutes, Kilnadima Leitrim took control of that. 6th place, up 1 place, Port Tumna. They got that win that they needed to see them into the quarterfinals. Declan McLaughlin's late goal proving the difference there over Mulla. And the team they defeated, Mulla, still scored an impressive tally of 29 points, but unfortunately not enough, so they're in 7th place. And Teen Aberdeen didn't get a win in this Senior B hurling championship, similar to Mulla, and defeated by 6 points by Ballindreen. So they're bottom of the Senior B hurling championship rankings. The intermediate hurling championship rankings then. Kinvara there in top spot. Last year's beaten county finalist, but like he scored 920. I don't think anyone can argue based on that performance at the weekend. That they're in top spot at the minute, and I know they have to go to preliminary quarter-final route, but that was just scoring difference between themselves and Ballygare at the weekend, and Ballygare's superior score difference proving the difference there. So Kinvara they're in top spot. Ballygare still very impressive. They're down 1 place into 2nd place, but look straight into quarter-final and didn't get to this stage of the competition last year. So I think Ballygare would be delighted now that they're into the last 8 of the competition. Third, Beha, they're up 1 place. You look at that spine of Joe Gantley, Adrian Toohey, Evan Hunt around the middle, Porrick Landers, the high cane in attack. It's a really impressive spine there, and Bella could really go deep in this competition. So they're up one place. Um, Karen Moore, really impressive early on against Craughwell, but Craughwell did fight back. So maybe that might just be a small bit of worry, but nothing too major for Carrickmore there. They're straight in to the quarter final, and they're really close to Tina last year, so they'll be looking to really push on this year. But they're in fourth place. Scanamont Ballymalaw in fifth place, straight through to the quarterfinals. Desi O'Brien will be happy to have this Scahanamon Ballymalaw team now. A 4 week break and straight into the quarterfinals. Sixth, Meelick Aircourt, a massive victory for Meelick Aircourt over Ceylon to get their Premier Intermediate status for next year, and a really professional performance by them too at the weekend. Seventh, Climber up one place. Just pipped Abbey Knockmoy in Group 2 to get their Premier Intermediate status there. Eighth place, down one place, Rahul Newcastle led Beha early on, but Beha just having too much in the end. But if you're looking from all these teams 1 to 8, these are now going to be Premier Intermediate clubs. So these 8 clubs would be delighted because there was a lot riding on the group stages for these clubs to get that Premier Intermediate status. Ninth place, Ceylon, down 2 places. Defeated well by Meelick Aircourt in the end. They're going to be a Premier Junior club next year, but they have a chance now against Clymer in the preliminary quarter-final to um, try and finish this Intermediate Hurling Championship on a high. Then 10th place, Craughwell second team remained there. Really fought back impressively against Carramore at the weekend. Abbey Knockmoy up one place. It probably just comes back to losing that game to Craughwell for them, which won't see them play knockout hurling, and they're a Premier junior club next year as well, so they're up one place. Kilbacon then in 12th place, up 3 places. Although they're going to be a Premier junior club next year, Kilbacon what a result against Turlockmore because it has been a difficult campaign for them. Stephen Lambert with 7 out of their 8 points, a real standout performer there. At 13th, down 2 places, is Clarenbridge's second team. For Clarenbridge, they'll be disappointed to concede 920, but they have lost a couple of their standout performers on this intermediate team to their senior hurling team with Clarenbridge. 14th, Turlockmore were beaten to Kilbacon and are now out of the championship, so they're down one place. Athenry, a heavy defeat for them against Scahanamon Ballymalaw at the weekend, which sees them lose all 3 of their group games, and Annadown remain in 16th place. A difficult campaign for them, losing to Kinvara, Ballygare, and Clarenbridge in the group campaign. As I mentioned there about the Premier Junior, so looking at the intermediate clubs that will play Premier Junior, you have Ceylon, Abbey Knockmoy, Kilbacety, and Annadown, and then into the Reeves Cups will be club second teams, which include Craughwell, Clarenbridge, Turlockmore, and Athenry. That's the latest version of the updated power rankings across the senior, senior B, and intermediate hurling championships. I'm now going to bring in Andy Coen and we're going to look back at all the action over the weekend. So the senior, senior B, and intermediate hurling championship groups have now come to an end. We'll enter knockout hurling now in 2 weeks' time, and the draws for the senior preliminary quarterfinals and relegation have been made, and same in the senior B and intermediate. We will get into that during the podcast, but we will look back on the action first, and I'm joined by Andy Coen to look back on the action. Andy, no other place really to start other than Craughwell and Loughrea at the weekend. Craughwell 323, Loughrea 222. They met last year in the group, and Loughrea were down a good few bodies at that stage too, and you still thought Loughrea were going to have it too much. For Craughwell at the weekend, but what a result for Craughwell at the weekend.
Yeah, great result, Paul. And I suppose the two of them, it was only really getting housework in order. The result was going to be, and it's still the group stage. So Craughwell will obviously be trying to dampen it down to that, but they had both beaten Killimerdale and beaten Kilkenarn in the group stage at that point. So, like I said, who was going to be first, who was going to be second, but probably wouldn't have been on the cards, being honest. Looking at Loughrea, you were expecting that they were going to drive on, that they were going to try and keep the momentum going from last year, and that they were going to look to win that game. And kind of, you would have thought, obviously, with Craughwell's kind of running form in the last couple of years, that they might have had it a little bit tight with them. But God, it was anything but. At one stage there were 12, 13 points up. No, Loughrea, in fairness to them, they never died. They clawed it back. But like Craughwell, like Kieran Lean, I have to say, continuing that school form, continue that underage kind of Galway form that he's had. Geez, for a guy that was only 18, I think maybe 2 weeks ago, I think he got 12, 13 points in the course of the hour. Like so, again, return to form for Tiernan Lean. Obviously, Tom Mannion is in top form anyway. So for Craughwell, they really kicked into top gear, and I thought a massive asset that they had was Stephen O'Halloran in goals, not just the penalty that he scored, but even his long range puckouts. They were lasers. There was no hanging the ball. It was long, deep into the full forward line, and it caused a lot of havoc with Adrian Prendergast as well. So no, kind of having first experience at Craughwell for 2 years, not so long ago, I always felt that there's that kind of natural talent in there. You'd see the likes of Nigel Kelly as well coming through. Like so, I suppose on the other hand for Loughrea, them coming away from that thinking, geez, that's a bit of a stumbling block for them now because that would not have been on the cards, considering they had no Jamie Ryan. Paul Hooban only came on in the second half. So they won't they'll be doing a little bit of head scratching now for the next heading into the next phase.
You mentioned obviously you worked with Craughwell for a few years there as manager of the club. Where did this Craughwell result come from? You mentioned there Kieran Lean. Has it just been the couple of youngsters that have come through onto the senior team over the last few years?
I think it has, yeah. And they've done a little bit of reshuffling. A couple of guys have kind of moved on from when I was there. And it seems to be that little bit of an injection. They had Lucas Kane there as well, too. He's gone into the backs again. He had a good year with Athenry, the Prez Athenry this year as well, too. He was on that team that lost the All Ireland final. Like so, I think they've actually found that gem of a forward in Kieran Lean. Now Adrian Prendergast has been there. Sean Gilligan came on. Of course, the evergreen Jamie Ryan is there at number 11 as well too, and he did a lot of damage yesterday, breaking up play, and just really throwing himself about, getting that ball out to the scores. Patrick Monaghan is still there, did a great job on Anthony Burns. So I suppose they for me, Craughwell, they really grew up in a sense because a lot of those guys that I mentioned from my time, along with those younger players, they've just gelled, and I suppose they'll be very, very happy. Again, I would imagine they'll try and kind of hold the horse for now, realise they've done very well, they've topped the group, but there's still a long way to go. But that kind of performance for me proves that they're actually able to do it, and there's hurling in them. So you'd imagine they'll be looking to have a long way to go.
Yeah, and there was a couple of Craughwell supporters quick to remind me as well during the week of that result last night on Sunday evening. So I'll admit there we got that one wrong. But even looking at Ian Daniels during the off season, he's added Dolly Hubin, he's added Niall Healy into the backroom team. They've obviously been big additions too for Craughwell.
I have, and I kind of witnessed this as well too myself in Gort in Teen Abbey and as well this year. I spotted Michael Coughlin yesterday on the line. We spotted Keelan Green for Craughwell on the line there. He seems to have a very good background team. David Hooban is joined for the year as well too, and of course Niall Healy. Niall Healy, Mr. Craughwell himself for so long. So when you have that kind of core bunch of lads that are driving it from the club as well too, that's creating a bit of an environment. I think they have a couple of guys that are minor this year as well too, doing water. So that all kind of an environment that's there now where it's very club orientated. And it's good to get a bit of an influence from David Hooban as well too on the outside. He's a lot of experience over the years with Ardrahan and McCourt. So for me, like, it's coming together nicely, and there's plenty of talent there. They have a very good intermediate team. They've got lots of underage teams. They're strong. I think they might have two, if not three, junior teams as well. So overall, like population, there's a lot of people there, a lot of players. It's a big club. So in a way, I'm not surprised, and they'll be delighted with how it's turned out in the group stages anyway.
Yeah, you just mentioned there about the intermediate team, and we've seen them do really well at intermediate. Even last year, they pushed Clymer really closely, bet Abbey Moy in the first game. Even when you're in charge back over Craughwell, was the talent always there for you in that club?
Oh, it was, yeah, it was, and that's a good thing for me. My own opinion would be that if you have that intermediate team, as long as you have that vehicle there, where you have guys that are now 18 years of age qualifying to play adult hurling, that if you have an intermediate set up there alongside a senior, that if they got a year or two at intermediate, which is very, very high standard, very competitive, and they're able to kind of hold their own and stand out and learn their lessons, I suppose, if you want to put it that way, Paul, that they're definitely more than equipped to go up to play a senior then once they get to 20 years of age, or at least, compare that to a club that might have a team junior B, for example. Nothing against junior B, but it's chalk and cheese comparison when you're trying to make the step up. But if you have that bit of experience and you got your eyes wiped a couple of times in intermediate, it's no harm for you to learn those lessons, for me anyway. And then you're ready to go to senior. Once you progress and keep your development going, it's a good thing to have that intermediate vehicle along with the senior team in the club.
Looking at Loughrea then, Andy, we probably all sort of had this question of how would Loughrea cope coming into this season as county champions. You see the result, as you mentioned, they were down by 13 points at one stage. If you're Tommy Kelly and the management team there, you probably do have to be concerned with that performance and how Loughrea went out of that game early on.
You do, I suppose, but at the same time, there's no point hitting the alarm button yet now. You know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
no point picking up the bat phone just now. But like at the same time, I suppose the positive side, they have Martin McManus back. He was probably their best forward yesterday on display. He was always a threat. He kept Mark Horn busy for the majority of the game. Um, you know, Jamie Ryan was missing, Darren Shaughnessy was missing. So from that point of view, you'd imagine they're going to improve um, as time is going on. But like definitely they wouldn't have wanted Anthony Burns to be as quiet as he was, and he kind of got a bit frustrated towards the end and got a straight red card. And it was easy enough then kind of to tie down the likes of well, Tiernan Killing was kind of very busy, I suppose, really, but apart from the freeze, he wasn't really, I suppose, contributing a whole lot from play. Colin Killian, I suppose, was busy enough during the game. Paul Hooban, like I said earlier, came on the second half. So look at they won't overly panic, but I suppose their performances they were quite flat now, which was surprising for Loughrea because they've nearly been the benchmark in the last couple of years. They got to the top last year and won it. So definitely Tommy Kelly, I would say, has lots to think of, but he won't be overly panicking yet because he knows the quality that he has there. He knows they have done it last year, which means they have the experience of getting out of tight games. That county final last year could have swung either way. But the fact that they were able to weather that and come through that and win that will give them the knowledge that they're able to get going once it gets to knockout. And that's different mentality as well too, Paul. When you get to knockout hurling, the stakes are way higher. The approach is, it's not as free flowing as it would be where you have a game where you're qualified anyway. So when the stakes are a lot higher, you'll be expecting that Loughrea will definitely come out firing even better than that.
We referenced it last week on the pod, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but is the challenge for Loughrea to get all these bodies and their best team back on the pitch this year?
Well, it is because from our own experience, it's very difficult to follow up that the second year. It's very rare that a new team that comes along wins a second year. We say I know Thomas has walked six in a row in Galway, but when they won their initial one in 2012, they didn't return it in 2013. We didn't win it in 2012 after 2011 and so on. Clarenbridge would say, for example, again in 2010, didn't, we pipped them in 2011. So that is the challenge, I suppose, for a team to try and, hold the head and keep yourself focused that, obviously some teams, I suppose, are guilty of letting it go to their head and losing control and not focusing coming back the following year. So I suppose the challenge is for Loughrea to kind of knuckle down again now in the next couple of weeks, and they'll analyse it. I'm sure Gavin Keary was there on the line yesterday. They'll pull that performance apart and see exactly, and I suppose it's good to get the wake up call at this point. There's no point heading into the knockout stages now, preliminaries and quarterfinals in the coming weeks, and getting your eyes open then at that point when it's too late. So I suppose they've got their warning nice and early.
It's really interesting there when you're talking about, I suppose, going for the second year for the county title. What is the challenge, I suppose, going from chasing that county title to then going from the team that I suppose everyone's hunting after you then?
I suppose I suppose it's really your focus. You know what I mean? Like a great story going back to years. Eamon Ryan, he was the manager of the Cork ladies football team, and he was
Hmm.
asked after they won their first All Ireland ladies football final. They were chasing for so long and they won it, and he was asked, I think, in the aftermath of the game, what's the secret to future success? And he blatantly said, small heads and small arses. Do you know what I mean? And if you can keep your notions, I suppose, and your ego and your attitude in check, and you can keep your body in top shape, and you're able to use, like I said earlier on, use your experience of coming out of hard games, going down to the wire, getting through a hard semi-final for the first time ever, and then you finally get it over the line in the final. That if you're able to handle, I suppose, winning, that you'll really put yourself in a position to be dominant from there on. Because I suppose every team that comes along, I actually just came across the All-Ireland final paper from 2017, and some of the stories in the Tribune at the time was that hopeful for a period of dominance. And it's the same when any team comes along from anywhere and they're saying, hopefully we'll dominate in the next couple of years. But for whatever the reasons, they lose concentration, they think they have it done. There's lots of factors that come into play. So it's rare that I think that you'll find a team that'll keep the focus from day one and then be fully dominant from there.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Stuff there in regards to chasing after that county title. If we're to just look then, Andy, at the other game in Group 2, Clymer Daly got over their neighbours. We all know this one was going to go down to the wire. Clymer Daly 117, Kilkenarren 116. It's been a difficult championship for Clymer Daly in the first two games, but they'll be delighted to get over this one.
They will because early on in the year they had a good show. They won Division Two in the league, so they would have been surely going into the championship with reasonably strong expectations, and obviously the new format of the championship that they would have been happy to go in and comfortable knowing that they could hold their own to survive. I suppose the early results didn't go that way. Craughwell obviously in Loughrea beat them, so it was more than likely always going to come down possibly to themselves and Kilkenarren, or even Craughwell going on form probably could have been in that mix there. Those three teams for two places. Um, but look, it was a tight game. It was a typical kind of do or die game. I think they were level 8 or 9 times over the course of the game, and Brian Burke came out with a goal. Brian Kincannon again is always, once you have that kind of marquee forward where you just have that one danger man. And a lot of the teams are kind of built that way, and everyone else kind of rose in the course of the hour. Um, they just had enough. I suppose Ian McLean kept the battle going for Kilkenarren as well too. Like so, it's kind of redemption for Daly in a way, just in time because that could have gone either way at all. Very very close game.
It's a big character too, isn't it? Because only scoring 3-8 against Loughrea, it was a big, heavy defeat to come into this one on the back of.
That's it. And like I said to you, you're only going to know your true kind of colours or what you're made of when it only comes down to that real knockout game. Like, and it's going to be the same way as we might talk a bit about the relegation games later on. Um, it's only when you really are on the line and it's in or out, it's up or down at that stage, that you're going to see it. Like so, look at Kieran Cannon and company down there in Clonmerdale. You're going to be delighted that they were able to pull it out and keep it going. And it's tough for Kilkenarren. They were in relegation a couple of years ago as well too, and it's like they're strong underage Kilkenarren, but it's just to get everyone through at the same time and keep that push going and kind of get that kind of backup for the likes of Midland and that, like so it's tough for them, but they're in four teams in relegation now and they're well equipped, I would imagine, to kind of have a good shot at that.
It's disappointing for Kilkenarren, isn't it? Like pushing Loughrea so close in that first game, getting nothing out of it. Same against Craughwell in the second game, pushing them really hard, and just they were two really positive performances by them in the opening two rounds.
Well, it is like, yeah, and you know, it's been in the kind of evident in a couple of the groups like that where you wouldn't have said that Kilkenarren would have got as close to Loughrea, or you wouldn't have said that Craughwell would have beaten Loughrea either the way it ended up yesterday. Um, it's just unfortunate like that you against stronger teams who say you're always going to get a purple patch in those games, and some days you'll run them right close like Kilkenarren did with Loughrea. But it really comes down, you have to be pinpointing those games against the teams that you're kind of fairly evenly matched with. And really for Kilkenarren and themselves, it really was down to that game. It was the same with Gort's group as well too, like that teams will be that little bit stronger and you're kind of saying, okay, we'll have a good shot at these guys. But when it comes to we really need to focus on this game, and for both teams, Kilkenarren and Killimer Daly, they were probably putting a big circle around this game to say, right, this is the one that's going to get us out.
You mentioned Brian Burke earlier on. We've seen him struggle with injury, and he's been a big loss when Clymer Daly haven't done him on the pitch. He scores 1-8. Brian Kincannon scores 4 points. They score 112 out of Clymer Daly's 117 at the weekend.
So that's the danger with most teams,
Yeah.
is that, Jason Rabbit, Athenry, for example. Yeah, but that's always been the way traditionally anyway. You're going to have the marquee forward. Conor Cooney has done it for centuries at this stage for St. Thomas's, So like, but at the same time, it's a lot easier said that you shut down him, you'll beat them. Like that's when everyone else. Then you're hoping that the rest of the armour and the military will come into action. Like so, look at yeah, it's you will be worrying when you're seeing that. that you see one or two names the most having all the scores behind them. Like, but as long as the rest of the players are just chipping in, getting points, and working hard throughout the game, that's really all you can expect because those guys are going to score those tallies anyway. So it's a matter of everybody else kind of rolling in as well.
Yeah, so just for people who are unaware with the groups, the way it is Thomas's, Craughwell, Ardmore, Mary, and Clarenbridge, they all advance directly in now to the quarterfinals and a 4 week break. Just on this point, Andy, 4 weeks, like it's a long time now to be waiting for your next game. Obviously, for some of these clubs, they'll be happy enough with it, clear any injuries, but I think it's a big challenge to even get challenge matches in this period now because there's a lot of clubs who are going to be in the middle of their championships and a lot like we seen last year too with a lot of teams who got straight to the quarterfinal. Some of them get got turned over then in the last eight.
Yeah, it is. My opinion on it, Paul, is that it is and it isn't. Craughwell would have cut your hand off a month ago to say that they were going to top the group and go straight to
Mhm.
quarter final. Um, oh yeah, you play the preliminary round game. It's better to be in form and have the hard games, and you get a chance to regroup, refresh. You've had three sets there, three games there, physical, a lot of injuries. As regards trying to find challenge matches, Tipperary are heading into their end stages there too. You'll get games here. You'll get an odd game here and there. Of course, if you're top in the group, you're going to have a good panel behind you. You'll get games in house. The risk of injury, there's loads of factors. There's good sides and bad sides to it. Would I rather go to a quarter final? I think I would because it just gives you that chance to refresh. Because niggles are there, historic injuries could be there as well too, and it gives you a chance to get everyone back. Like so, look, there's good sides on good points on both sides, Paul. But I wouldn't overly kind of jump for one more than the other. I'd you know
Yeah, yeah, I think that's fair enough there too. And just on the preliminary quarter-final draw, Turlockmore, Clymer Daly, Sarsfields, Castlegar, Loughrea, Mike Cullen, Athenry, Tommy Lerkins, and in the relegation semi-finals, Captagan, Kilkenarn, Ardra and Gort. We will touch on that draw later on. Just looking at Group 1 then, Andy, your own club Gort beaten 190 to 114. Early on, they looked like they were going to win this one. Is it surprising for you that Gort have ended up in a relegation semi-final again?
and it is really, I suppose, kind of with the Gort hat on. Um, like I said earlier, you would have classed kind of St Thomas as being the prime team there. Athenry have good form and kind of age bracket wise, and that they've come from Senior B. They're on a good run. They're even just come from not just because they've come from Senior B, but like they are a little bit further ahead talent wise, I suppose, at the minute and development wise. They have a good age kind of profile with the team. Um, and again, it was down for me down to that Mike Cullen game where you target that game and you get everything ready for that. And look, they put in a good battle. They were a nice breeze, well up at half time in the stadium yesterday, and a big factor. But look at I think Mike Cullen just got the bit between their teeth at the right time with 5 minutes to go and kicked on in and got a goal. And it's look at it's unfortunate for Gort, like, but now they're into a fair battle now with their local rivals, Ardrahan, with the way the drawing's been made. So no, I probably would have hoped that they were able to avoid it. They've put in reasonably good performances in the last couple of years. They ran Thomas's all the way last year into a draw and got through relegation, I suppose, last year. And it's a little bit more kind of on thinner ice this year than with the reformat of the championship for next year. So, look, they'll have it all to do, but you're hoping that again, that kind of fight comes out in the real fight comes out in a relegation game.
Challenge probably is for them now, even going into this relegation game. Like you look, they're obviously playing Ardra and you look at Captagal Kilkenarn. There isn't one of those teams that you could confidently call that are going to make the drop this year.
No, you can't. Like it's very evenly balanced. The four teams could have easily qualified as quick as they're in the position that they're in at the minute. I saw Ardrahan yesterday in Loughrea, and that they've had a good run in the last couple of years as well too. They've pushed Clarenbridge a couple of times. Obviously, Johnny Glynn is not with them this year. Capitagal were in the senior final last year, and so on. So no, it's a very very interesting one to put in. Put four names in a hat and pick one out and say this is the team that's going to go south. Um, so it's not an easy job, and both teams will be looking to get it done in the semi final. All the teams will be looking to get it done in the semi final. Sorry. Um, so no, it's a very difficult position to be in, and trying to keep training going for the next 2 weeks and trying to get lads right and get their heads around the idea that they're now fighting for their lives, especially with the drop that's coming next year. Like so, it's a tough place to be in.
My column once again, I think when people are doing predictions at the start of the year, they might be looking at Mike Cullen in this group and expecting them to come bottom. I think people did have that, but you look at the result they got. It was going against them yesterday for long periods, and got a result out of that. Like they really have began to establish themselves now as the senior hurling club.
Well, they have and it'd be the bigger fool that'd be expecting them because of their location on the map that that hurling wouldn't be their prime game. Like they're playing senior hurling for a reason and they're up there for a reason. So you're dealing with guys that are in good shape. They're physical. They're strong. They play the game hard. Like so, when it comes down to a straight fight, which for me I keep repeating myself. Um, those kind of games, tactics are out the window. There's really nothing to it that you can put down on paper and say this is the way I want you to play. It's literally your man that square 5 meters, and once it comes into that, it's all out war. And look at when it came to yesterday, they kicked at the right time. So for me, Mike Cullen, any of those teams that are bordering on dual clubs and trying to keep going both sides of the game going. That they're doing it for a reason, like which means that they're good at both. Like so, I'm not shocked really with Mike Cullen the way they are.
Yeah, Aina Noon too, and then James Bradley like really did step up with big scores for them too yesterday.
Yeah, Andy Noon's there a long time now. I played against Andy
Yeah.
Noon, hurled with him in Medtronic years ago, and played against him against with Gort a long time ago. So a wily fox, like well able to go and been around for a long time. Like so, when it comes down to a straight battle, like I said to you, Andy Noon is well able to go. Like so, no, just good luck to them anyway. It's tough on Gort, but that's the way it falls.
Top spot then in the other game yesterday. I think a lot of people were interested in this one when as the game was going on. Thomas is 123, Athenry 120. Jason Rabbit obviously catching a lot of the headlines here. 114. As close as Athenry got, they'll have to have regrets considering hitting those 17 wides yesterday.
Yeah, like again, the big number is after Jason Rabbit. Rowan Hardiman's there as well too. But again, you can't afford to have that 17 wides. It was like Oran Moore a couple of weeks ago at Saracens in the first round where they had 17, 18 wides. They were 2-0. They won that game, fair enough. But you're looking at that saying, God, our efficiency is very poor there. Um, we know, obviously, we know St Thomas is the way they are, and they've had their little bit of a break now through the winter, and they got a chance to really recharge the batteries. And it was really a test of where are Athenry at, really more so, because we know plenty about St. Thomas's and they're going to be right in the mix anyway. Whoever St. Thomas is beaten this year, whatever stage it's going to be, they'll have it all done. But for Athenry, I suppose it's a good gauge for them to see where they are. They've had a good year last year, they're up. Um, so look, I suppose the spread of scores would probably be their main issue, um, being so reliant on Jason Rabbit. So no, look, but overall, they're well through. They're keeping their momentum going. They're qualified. They're heading into the knockout stages now. Like so, look at yeah, they'll be disappointed with the way they were close all the way. And again, looking at that wide tally, they'll be saying we had chances to knock that game. So look at yeah, they'll have, and that's good too. Look at no more than Loughrea. They've plenty to think about at the right time, and it'll give them a chance to kind of pull it apart and be ready to go then in 2 weeks.
On Jason Rabbit's performance, how much of a positive is that for Galway hurling, do you feel?
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. Again, with Kieran Lean, kind of that nearly influx from the president Athenry. It's huge, Paul, because it's been documented that we've had a poor enough run the last couple of years, poor performances, and an injection is needed. So look at whether it's any of these guys coming, the Anthony Burns is great to see then this year, making a dent with Galway. And then when you have this kind of input then from a younger age, again, Aaron Nyland also in that bracket, I suppose a little bit too young at this point. But you're hoping that under 20 is going to be a good run for them and all that. Um, so look at it, it's very, very good that you have players like that making such an impact at such a high level at such a young age. So fingers crossed at least for the maroon and white.
Yeah, it was actually a question that came in from Bernie, one of the listeners. After the group games, what players put up the hand that should get a serious look at Galway for next year? These players, as we've mentioned them, Jason Rabbit, Kieran Lean, these players, even Brian Callanan with Athenry in
Yeah.
patches has impressed too. Are they the sort of players that have impressed most for you?
Well, they have. You're looking at that kind of under 20 kind of squad that's there. Rory Burke is doing very well for Oran Moore as well too, like so Ryan O'Donnell and that. So the only worry is they're still only on that 19, 20 border.
Mm.
So look, I suppose Kieran Enoch says only 18. Aaron Nyland, same. Jason Rabbit 19. So it's look at yeah, they have to push up now. Jason Rabbit was on the fringe of the senior panel the year just gone by as well too. So Yeah, those are kind of the main players that you're seeing because kind of the Galway panel last year, whoever was there was there. There wasn't really anyone that was outside of that panel that you could say might be worth a look. Maybe Micheál Power and Tina Abbey might be worth a look at. Um, but no, overall, it's good to see those kind of young players coming through. Brian, like I said, Brian Callan with Ardrahan as well too. Sean Gardner is very, very good for Ardrahan as well too. So you wouldn't know different players like that. Like yeah, we really need the injection because results have kind of shown the last couple of years that we've not been going too well, and we need, it can't be just down to Cathal Mannion all the time now with the form he's in.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting there some of the names that have put their hand up. Just on Thomas's then, like it was going against him at stages yesterday, but classic Thomas's David Burke gets on top towards the end. Conor Cooney with seven, Aina Burke with four, Victor Manzo with 1-3. The usual names stepping up and the young lads really added it to two. But they do really seem to be in a good place now heading into the
They
quarterfinals.
do, yeah. Damien McLean, obviously, have a good game midfield as well too, and you have Shane Cooney, again on top form, and then when Jason Rabbit was kind of going riot, they wheeled out some guy called Finton Burke, so that just shows you that what they have, and I think that break that they had, not getting the seven in a row. Gee, that was obviously going to come to an end sometime. But it's given those players a chance. Obviously, Finton, again, we said David would have been in with the senior panel all year. Um, but for the likes of Manzo, the likes of those kind of solid club players that St. Thomas's have had in the last number of years, it's a chance for Cathal Burke, it's a chance for all those guys, Dara, to relax. James Regan, there again yesterday. It just gives them a chance to kind of relax. And the age profile in that team, even though they have a lot of miles on the clock, uh, the age profile is very early 30s. Very, I think, David is into the mid 30s now. Like that's about it. But overall, Conor Cooney, Aina, once you have those guys, when you have those guys put away, you'll have it all done. And the team that thinks they can do that will want to be on form on the day. Like so, if I was, had to write something down now on paper, St. Thomas's are going to be in the top three at some point, and they'll be looking forward to kind of having a good crack at the likes of the teams that are showing form now at the minute. So no, they'll have a big say.
When you see Loughrea's result, and obviously Clembridge's form has been really impressive, Turlock's response has been good, and Ormore Mary obviously impressive in the groups as well so far, Sarsfield's as well. Would Thomas's be one of the favourites now you'd be tipping?
Well, I suppose I was in Ballinasloe Saturday. Um, I watched Turlock yesterday. I was in Athenry yesterday evening. I saw Loughrea. I haven't seen Cambridge yet now so far. And the one thing that was kind of jumping out at me yesterday evening in Athenry, looking out from the stand, was that it's a very, very even championship. Um, and now the Capitagan, who contested the final last year, they're gone. So those teams that you named out, every single one of those teams will all be saying, provided we get our house in order and we get ourselves to a final, they would all be having the same ideas that they could win it. So finally, I know St. Thomas's are coming back into now as well too. Like so, they're going to have a big say. Like I said, Turlock. Um, it's very, very even, Paul. You couldn't possibly call it at the minute. Until it gets to that kind of the quarter final stage. I'd say when a team gets into full gear, whether you win the group or whether you're directly through or you go through that preliminary quarter final, it's very really difficult to say just now. But those kind of four or five teams that you're after naming there, they're more than likely going to be the teams that'll have the say. Plus, you have your teams, we'll say the outside bets, like last year with Capitagal. Now, Craughwell have put themselves into that kind of talk as well too. Like a team that, if they get a run going on any given day, then in a knockout game, they could actually do damage. Like so, yeah, it's very very tight.
Do you feel this is one of the most even championships in a long time in Galway?
Oh, it is, of course. Sure, we're coming off the back of six in a row, which is great for one club.
Mm.
That's the only thing, the downside with that. Like it's very dominant. Like so, after a couple of years of kind of going over and back, ourselves, Sarsfield, St. Thomas's, Clarenbridge, Port Trumna pulled one again in 2013. I went kind of all sides very early in the last kind of decade. Like so now it's after coming off the back of a very dominant St. Thomas's side. It's good to see kind of an even championship, and there's good crowds as well too going to the matches as well in Ballinasloe and that and Athenry yesterday even. Like so there's big interest in it.
Yeah, it has been great to see. You mentioned there about Sarsfields and Capitagal, you're obviously doing commentary for that for the weekend for Go FM. But just on Capitagal, because it is such a shock like that they're out of the championship after 3 games, as we mentioned in the county final last year. Was it just a case for Capitagal this year that they just never really got going to the levels they got to last year in the latter stages of the championship?
But I suppose kind of looking at Capitagal on Saturday even, again they just didn't get the spread of scores kind of from the overall six guys up front. You're going to have the Garveys, you're going to have those guys at the back that are going to stay fighting all day long. Great defenders, Declan Crone again still turning out great performances there for Capitagal as he's done for a long time. But just kind of up front, the over reliance on Liam Collins the last couple of years, he was very quiet Saturday. Even Niall Collins did a lot of scoring. Jarlath Mannion was kind of in and out of the game. Malone there at a great county final last year as well too. He got 4 points in the final last year, very quiet. So for me, kind of Capitagal, I suppose to kind of match, they had Dan Nevin back. To kind of match the heights, they just needed to kind of pull that apart, the final performance, and get that better spread of scores. And I suppose that was the difference with Sarsfields. And then the last year that they had, they had the marquee with Kevin Cooney. He was the main man. But you had Cosgrove. You had lots of different guys there that were kind of all chipping in at different stages. Fergus Deely, they were all kind of tearing into it. And kind of working that little bit better. They sat John Cooney a little bit further back, right in front of Collins for the majority of the game, and he scored some monster points as well too with the wind in the first half. So I think overall the difference between the two teams was that Saracens had that little more kind of spread of scores compared to Capitagan.
And even with Cappy as a whole, you mentioned there Dan Nevin back, added Damien Joyce, who replaced Liam Donoghue this year in the backroom team. And even you consider getting to the league final too against Moore coming into the championship, and they were out the Collinses for the league final as well. It felt like they were coming in a good place, but it shows how tight this group is as well. Because if they got a result against Larkins the first day, they would have had the head to head on them.
Yeah, that's it. And plus with last year's performances, they put a target on their back as well as also, which they kind of has made teams more wary of them, and kind of forewarned really that they have to kind of batten down the likes of Collins and that to kind of keep themselves in a game with Capitagle. But look, it was very hard. I suppose it was last year they kind of once they kicked into gear and beat Saracens in that quarter final and got over St Thomas's. And they, at the end of the day, they only lost that county final by 2 points. Loughrea weren't overly dominant in that final either. So I suppose you could probably say in a way that their chance kind of went last year because they came and got to that final really out of nowhere. They had their run of semi-finals there from 16, 17 on around that up to 2020 and that. And, they were unlucky on so many occasions there. Whereas this time they got to a final kind of out of nowhere. And that was really their opportunity to kind of get that title that they had craved. So I suppose it was always going to be that little bit difficult, and a lot of guys came back in, like you said, Damien, Michael Broderick got involved as well too. So, look, again, the great buzz around the club, like we were saying about Craughwell earlier on. It's the tails are up, but it's good. Unfortunately, they were a little bit flat, and like I said, that probably maybe targeted that Tommy's game to get those points to get themselves out of the group.
You mentioned then Saracens' performance. Without Alex Kinnear, without Paddy McCarthy, without Darren Marcy and Joseph Cooney only comes on. I think that's the most impressive thing when you look at it from the weekend.
And what kind of stood out for me was that the actual physicality of Saracens. They're actually a big team. Joseph Cooney came out, and in fairness, had a big bearing on the turn of the game. After half time, Cabatagal kind of came back into the game and got themselves going. And the goal that John Cosgrove popped out to Kevin Cooney was what really quenched them. But Joseph Cooney came onto the field then, and Michael Garvey had to pick him up, which really kind of took Michael Garvey from the game. And Joseph Cooney won a couple of hard balls. He obviously used his experience and his size. But then, like you said, Alex Kinnear had such a good game the last round, didn't play the first round against Oran Moore. Darren Marcy, for some reason, not playing either. So you'd have to imagine once, if Francis Madden can get all those guys back on their feet and fully right, that they will now, after last year, getting pipped in that quarter final against Capitagal, they'll be looking to get one back. And plus, they had that kind of element of revenge in them too, as well, that they wanted to get back with Capitagal to level it up from last year because that was a bit sore. I suppose they would have had big expectations this time last year to be going a lot further than they did.
You mentioned Joseph coming in there at centre forward, and the way John's playing this year at 6'2", it's probably gives Sarsfield the option now to push Joseph Cooney even to centre forward, but even Dara Donoghue as well, like give them a huge platform in that half back line.
Well, I felt Jared Donoghue was my choice of man of the match, to be honest, after that game, because I felt that he got the first score of the game. He made a vital interception on Jared Mannion at one stage where Mannion had broke the line. He was going through, turned him over. So then now you're talking. Then you can free up Joseph Cooney, who was kind of nearly, if you wanted to say, I wouldn't, restricted kind of from his natural pushing forward kind of qualities. And now he gives such an option at centre forward or along that half forward line, because he played in an Ireland final a long time ago in the half forward line himself, 2015. So you're talking a guy with loads of experience on the big stage. So if you have that option then for Kieran Dolan on the half forward line, it's massive. And again, like I said, he caused Michael Garvey a lot of problems coming out the last day. So yeah, it's good for Saracens. They can push him up, but I'd have to say a mention for Kevin Cooney as well too. He's just electric. And with a defender's hat on, I'm watching those games, kind of saying, geez, how would I actually go about, or what would you have to do to kind of quieten his influence in a game, like, because you'd want to have all the aces in your pack to be able to take care of a forward like that, like, and any team that has him or any forward like that, they're going to have a big say.
Yeah, it's fantastic too to see Kevin Cooney really starting to get back to that levels we've all seen McCoy, because he's had a couple of tough injuries to
Indeed,
deal
yeah.
with over the last year or two. So big positive there. Just before looking at that Larkins or more Murray result, like Sarsfields have to be happy where they are now going into this quarter final, considering losing the first day and the two performances they've given against Larkins and Cappy in the last two games.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I said, they've had a good couple of years now where they've been quite strong, and they've got the influence of the likes of Darren Morrissey. They've really come into the team now, and they're nailing down their own, and they're pushing on the McCarthy's and all those guys. So yeah, it's definitely they're back. I would say last year was very, very sore. Not alone losing to Capitagal, their next door neighbours, but not kind of getting through to that semi-final stage where they would believe that they're as good as what's there now. If they met the likes of a Turlockmore, or a Loughrea in a county semi-final, we say down the line possibly. Again, they're a wily team. They're good. They're a good unit. They have that marquee forward. They have good defenders. They're going to have a big say, I think, and they'll make a hard job for a team down the line.
Larkins then, or more Murray, Larkins knew they sort of had to win this one to get through, and they did win that, and Cappy lost, so it obviously got them through and got them third place, 19 points to 16. Jason Flynn again just showing his value for Tommy Larkins once again at the weekends, 7 points out of their 19 at the weekend.
Well, you see, Tommy Harkins as well are a kind of a team that they've a reasonably not too high age profile, and they have a lot of experience. They've been around the block, and they're obviously their main kind of show jumping wall is this quarter final mark that they've been just finding it that bit difficult to get past. But excuse me, again, the last day, like I said, Jason Flynn, McHugo, Kevin, did he get 4 or 5 points again the last day?
Five, yeah.
Colin Flynn chipped in. All those players, like, Conor Gardner, I always find with Tommy Larkins that when Conor Gardner's on form, he's such a big, strong man. He's able to throw his weight around. He's a great target man. And when they kick into gear, there's just something about Tommy Larkins that when they get going, they're like a force. Like, they're all really boisterous on the field, and they're all shouting and roaring, and they're roaring the ball over the bar and away. And then when Jason Flynn then kicks into gear and he gets going, like, if Jo starts, you'll do well to quieten him, like, when he gets onto form. Like, so look, they were again, their backs were to the wall. They needed to win the game to get out and stay alive. And then obviously with the results in Ballinasloe on Saturday as well, that game was on in Athenry at the same time. So for me, again, no more than Craughwell, the ability is there with Tommy Larkins. It's just to kind of get that jump as they further progress. Maybe Owen Moore, possibly, would you say they had one eye on the under-20 final coming up this week? But still, Rory Burks, had a big influence in the game. Ryan O'Donnell played. Again, Gareth McInerney popping up with a point. It probably wasn't the ideal result for Oran Moore either, because they're looking to again avenge last year's developments where they went from top to bottom in the flash of a goal. So even though they were qualified, they had done well in their first two games. They wouldn't have wanted to have lose that game, because that's losing momentum. And even though they're through, now they have to get them going again now and get them wound up for the knockout stages.
Well, there's still, I know Armor Mary obviously didn't go out to lose that one, but there's still the fact they were competitive at the weekend with the back of the 20s final coming up against Loughrea on Thursday night. Still take some positives from the weekend.
Oh, they will, of course. Like they've their house in order before the weekend's game. You know,
Mm.
they weren't the ones coming into the game to fight for their life. And like I said last year, I suppose they allowed Saracens to get that last minute John Coney goal to send them all the way down to the relegation battle where they, comfortably beat Gort in that semi final. So no, look, I just think it's a small blip in the road for them, but like they might be in that category for Craughwell for me, kind of where they're on that little outside of the top three or four. But on any given day, they're going to make it hard for any team. They're physical, they're very fit, they're young, they have experience obviously with Niall Burke also. So no, Ormer Mary now will be looking to progress because they've done very, very well underage in the last couple of years too. So, a progression to a semi-final now or a quarter-final, semi-final for Ormer is going to be another good step for them on their road to, pushing on.
Looking then at Group 3 and the Clembridge get over Castlegare, an incredible second half performance really from Castlegare to try and get back into that one. But you can sort of look at it in two ways. It's a great game for Clembridge to get, considering the manner of their first two games, and then for Castlegare, a great way in one sense to respond after that heavy defeat to Turlockmore.
Yeah, that's it. It's Castlegar, I suppose, got their ducks in a row again. That game with Ardrahan at the start was the kind of the decider, because you would have imagined that Turlock and Clarenbridge were going to come out of that group. Um, and plus they had lost to Ardrahan in the last 2 years before that as well. No, a very poor performance in their last game against Turlock more that they couldn't have been happy with. So again, they were looking for an improvement, and they were leading nearly pretty much on time up. But again, Aaron Nyland showed the difference there as well too, and. I suppose look at your Farrer is still kind of nailing your points here. That would be a worry for me anyway for Castlegar is that you're relying on a guy that's into his forties at this stage. So, but look at they've qualified again. You look back then to the quarter final last year with Loughrea.
Yeah.
Um, Castlegar are traditionally a difficult team to play anyway, no matter what way you think they are. So look at that, they're going to make life awkward for somebody anyway, definitely in the knockout stages.
Where do you feel Cambridge are? Like, they're obviously contenders, there's no question of that. But for me, the one question mark I still have is like they've been tremendous in the group, the three games, but when this comes to winter hurling, because we've seen Cambridge in previous years.
Yeah, and I think it's an awful slight, and I've heard that same kind of phrase in the last couple of days that it'll be a different story in a month's time and this and that. But a lot of those Clarebridge guys played in the county final
Yeah,
2021. Shane Ryan, obviously Gavin Lee kind of came on the scene around that same time, um, and they've a lot of experience. But for me, two factors I think for me with Clarebridge this year is that they obviously have Aaron Nyland now, who is absolutely electric. I saw him in a challenge game actually, going back a couple of weeks ago. But for me also, Keen Salmon is back at 14. And he came on the semi-final last year against Loughrea and he gave Johnny Coen and Hubin and them guys a fair fight with a couple of late high balls. So when you have that kind of attacking option now added to their forward line, obviously with Evan Nyland and Joshua Ryan is there now as well too. Shane Ryan is there, Sean Kilduff, all those, they all have high experience at intercounty panels. um, so for me, I think Clarenbridge, I genuinely would put Clarenbridge right there with St. Thomas's because you can't dismantle that Turlockmore team in the
yeah,
fashion that they did either in the first round for me. Like so, I think that Aaron Ireland is probably that kind of marquee forward again now too that we're saying. And surprisingly, he's so young. So in 2 or 3 years' time, I wonder what we'll be saying about him. But for now, I think the difference with Clarenbridge is that they have that kind of better attacking option up front, because they're very strong overall. They're athletic, they're fit, they're young, very young overall. Um, so I think that's for me is the difference with Clarebridge and why they're going to be right there.
yeah. There probably is a challenge to keep up. Like we've seen them hit the net so much times throughout the championship in this group campaign. That's obviously going to become a challenge, and teams are probably going to play a sweeper against them. You'd imagine as this championship goes on.
You probably have to, but you won't beat raw pace either at the
Yeah,
same time. And kind of that's what stuck out for me with Kieran Lean yesterday. And Johnny Cohen had his hands full quite often in the game, like with just out and out raw pace. So you can put your sweeper in place if you want. But if you have kind of a target in those areas that's where there is the space left and right of that sweeper and stuff, and you're trying to eliminate it or play it tidy for a certain part of the game and then deliver it in as quick as you can, you know, you won't outdo that kind of pace at the same time. And eventually you probably will get worn down, like where you have defenders trying to mind that they're going to eventually falter, in my opinion, anyway.
You mentioned you're obviously at Turlough and Ardrahan 2 yesterday. Turlough 220, Ardrahan 312. Is this a sort of funny one for Turlough? You thought at the start they were going to take off, and then I suppose Ardrahan get a few late consolation scores to maybe make the scoreline look a bit better. But where would you say Turlough are after this one?
Well, I suppose on the surface of it, Ardrahan kind of did dominate, but they never kind of got within 8, 9 points of them at the same time. They just had enough to kind of keep them at arm's length. And again, Sean Loftus showed very well. Tom Kirk, Jamie Holland, Dahi went off for a little bit of an injury at one stage, but he came back on. So again, that's a Turlough Moore team, like we said, lots of experience. Went to a county final not so long ago. So they're going to be again have a big say. And that loss to Clarenbridge in the first round as well too is going to be very, very still stuck in their throat. Like, so they'll have something to kind of beat, Cambridge will possibly down the line as well too for a bit of motivation. Like, so no, they did what they needed to do. They get out of Athenry. They're heading on for the knockouts.
Yeah, you obviously still feel Turlough are definitely still in this conversation, anyways.
Oh, they have to be, yeah, because I suppose I know Barry Callan got sent off last year in that semi or the quarter final with St Thomas's. But look at they were leading that game after that sending off. And they'll have to be kind of disappointed with how they allowed Thomas's to get some puck outs away and give the ball to Shane Cooney a few times and let him run up the field and get easy enough scores. So they'd have to be looking at that and kind of once they have those areas tidied up and they get themselves into gear as well too. They look after themselves and get themselves going more so than overly worried about opposition. Um, You'd have to imagine that they're going to be right up there as well. Yeah.
It's even the spread of scores in the last few games. Like when you look at the forward line, you look like Barry Callan the last day didn't really get a score, but he gets the goal yesterday. You have Jamie Holland, Sean Loftus, even Tom Quirk's played centre forward at different stages. There is a spread of scores there, and obviously still Sean Lennon to come back into this. They'll be hoping at some stage too.
Exactly. And you're kind of, I suppose, one thing against Turlough more in the last, going back the last 10, 15 years is that kind of marquee out and out forward where they're going to get them the 110 every single day, no matter what. Sean Loftus has seemed to have pushed up that little bit further. Obviously, Sean Lennon is there as well. So they do have that kind of better spread of scores. I suppose they're going about it in a different angle than kind of other teams that they're not overly reliant. But at the same time, you'd imagine if they had that one forward, then that's an inter-county level forward that's producing at that level also coming back to a club team. But they'll be very happy. They recover from that loss. And they've taken care of business kind of to get themselves out. Like, so no, overall, Turlough Moore, they got the job done, and that's and Ardrahan made them think for a while. Obviously, in that second half yesterday, pulled out 3 goals as well too. So just those things starting out, and again, it's happening in the last group game, so plenty of time to analyze it and do all those huddle clips to see what's going wrong.
Uh, for our Drahan, then they'll obviously be disappointed with that Castlegar game because it ultimately does come back to that for them in the group. But even after the heavy defeat to Clarenbridge too, and it looked at stages early on like it was going to be another tough day. But Francis O'Connor will have to be happy with the way his team battled in this one.
He has to be, and he has Michael Walsh back as well too at full back, so that's a massive plus for them. Him missing the first 2 games. Derek Fahy is obviously at 6, but for me up front, they had a good spread of scores as well too. We said earlier on Brian Callan, Sean Gardner, Ian Linsky got a goal yesterday. Ross Albertini got a goal as well too. So overall, that Wiley Fox, Ger Ford as well too. Popped over a point from the half back line. So overall, they'll be happy that heading into that kind of relegation battle now at Gort that they're well equipped to go for it and they'll have good battling qualities as well too. They've had a lot of experience now. They've gone to quarterfinals in the last few years and obviously they had the Johnny Glynn as well too and he's not with them this year. So look at those players have a lot of experience in the last number of years like so they will look forward to that kind of semi-final relegation battle and say right look at once we get ourselves in order we should go a long way.
We obviously mentioned Andy the relegation semi-finals, very hard to call. But looking at the preliminary quarter-final draw, Turlough, Clymer Daly, you probably expected that Turlough Moore should have enough. Sarsfields, Castlegar on current form, you would say Sarsfields Loughrea might call in, you're expecting a reaction from Loughrea. And then when it comes to Athenry, Larkins, that's probably the 50-50 one.
It would be 50-50, but I'd say Saracens will have, they'll want to have their going in with their eyes wide open to Castlegar as well too, because that's a well experienced team, like, and take them for granted at your pearl, like they proved last year. So you'd have to say probably Loughrea might have a bit too much for Mike Cullen. Turlock more once, if they turn on that kind of energy that they had in that second game with that win over Castlegar, that they're going to, have a little bit too much for Killimor Daly in that. Um, and at the right, Tommy Larkins, yeah, you'd be doing well to call that one because that's two very, very evenly matched teams. And again, Tommy Larkins are saying to themselves, we get ourselves right, we get ourselves into gear. Um, and again, at the right, coming up from last year, they'll know exactly where they are after that. And if they can get over that, well, then they're saying to themselves, right, we're into quarter final now. Let's keep this momentum going. So yeah, tight games now overall.
Looking at the Senior B then, the results, Ballindereen 123, Teen Aberdeen 117. That knocks Teen Aberdeen out of the championship, but Ballindereen have really built impressively throughout this championship. Really unlucky against Kilnadine and Leitrim. Two wins from three. They'll have to go the quarter-final route now where they face Portumna. But in fairness to Ballindereen, it's been an impressive campaign for them.
Very, and what kind of stood out to me yesterday, looking at them at first hand from the sideline in Loughrea yesterday, was their sheer power. Physically very, very strong. Um, just that little bit kind of probably stronger than Teen Aberdeen in that game yesterday. They kind of had a really big purple patch before halftime with the nail to goal, and Luke Prendergast was electric. Very difficult to tie him down. Lafferty, Meehan, all those guys, Robbie Lane, all those guys, very, very hard to. They've been on the road as well, no more than Teen Aberdeen a lot over the last couple of years. They went up and down a bit, won the intermediate final. Done well at Senior B as well last year, and they proved this year with that again beating that Mellows team. Um, and ran Leitrim Kilkenny very, very close. So I saw also that good strong teams like that all will be hoping that they'll have a big say in the outcome of that championship.
Yeah, Luke Prendergast and Roy Lane have really been their kind of two go-to men this year in attack, and they've been really racking up impressive scores.
Oh yeah, Luke Prendergast now yesterday was just electric. Like yeah, they created the spaces, kind of got that to Prendergast, and he was very, very quick. Seems to kind of filled out a little bit more so in the last year or two, and a real target man for the now in that full forward line. So like I said, they'll be looking to, they won't be overly bothered about the likes of Leitrim Clondima down the line if they were to meet them again. You'd imagine they'll be well equipped against Portumna in that game as well too. Who had a good battle as well yesterday. So no, Ballinderry very, very impressive.
You're obviously involved, Andy, this year with Teen Aberdeen. Looking at the season now, do you think even going on last year against Watergrass Hill and even this year going up to Senior B, do you maybe just think it was a long year for them when you look at it now overall?
I suppose it's been a long 3 years for them. More so, they contested the intermediate county final 2 years ago in 23. They had to dust that off, come back all the way to an intermediate county final last year, won that, got to an All Ireland series, and then it's such a high in Crow Park, then to such a low in the result, I suppose, and straight back into a league then in early April, and it's been a long couple of years for them. Like, so I suppose the break can do them no harm, but yeah, I suppose you could say that. I suppose a couple of guys there, they've great service, done a lot of miles up in the clock, the likes of Shane and the boys there. Who again, they're by no means any, and they're into their early 30s is all. Um, so that kind of continuous effort for over a long period of time is going to take its toll.
Yeah, so that actually, as we said there, Teen Aberdeen's campaign comes to an end. Ballindereen played Portumna. Kilnadine and Leitrim, the group winners here, 119-16 over Mellows. Impressive for Kilnadine and Leitrim here because it was really tit for tat throughout this game, and only the last 5 minutes they really opened up and won this one by six in the end.
Yeah, like Mellows again, we're heavily reliant on that kind of 17 team again. They're looking to Ty Karen, I suppose, to lead the line there for them, like Conor Hines and that. So look at they'll be happy they've qualified, they've gone through to that quarter final stage. Like, but no, you'd have to say in that Senior B championship now that Kennedy and Leitrim are going to be looking to have a big say on that. Last year they kind of didn't kind of reach the highs of what they had been kind of, I suppose, touted the year before. But when you kind of have that kind of that marquee for Colin Malloy, and you have the Kennys and all those guys, Jack O'Malley kind of backing it up as well too. And again, they've their centre back. Um, really dominant. So they're definitely
Daniel
well
Comer,
equipped now
yeah.
to they're Loughrea, yeah. So they're really dominant now and well equipped, and they're sitting in that semi-final stage now, waiting to see what's coming through.
Obviously, Killing Leitrim and Haskell straight into the semi-finals at the minute. Do you think they're both in pole position at the minute to make the final?
Well, you'd have to say on the results base, like yeah, they're like Haskell as well too have kind of really hit form. I suppose all built around this the magic of Cathal Mannion that he's brought his inter-county form into hit 50 points in 3 games in club hurling at any level is phenomenal scoring. Like, there's no point harping on about his skills and ability. We all know that for a long, long time at Galway. Um, but to be looking, he's got himself right. Whatever few bits of injuries he's had going back the last couple of years, he's come back in supreme shape. He's going to get an All Star in a couple of weeks' time, nailed on. Um, so look at again, Sean Blake and all those guys back in again too. Kelly and Pádraig Mannion is always ever dominant in that team. Like, so you'd have to imagine at the minute again, the teams that are in those or those quarterfinals, Portumna, Ballinderry, Pierce's, Mellows, good teams, but they'll want to be really hitting a magical day to beat either of those two in a potential semi final.
You mentioned Cathal Mannion there, nailed on All-Star for you. Have you seen some teams that were picked, like picking their All-Star teams, and they didn't have Cathal Mannion on it? Would you be stunned if Cathal doesn't pick up an All-Star?
It's very similar to the likes of Tony Kelly, what he was doing there a couple of years during COVID, and that were Clare weren't winning All Irelands, and he was racking up. I think did he do 45 points or something in 3 games? I think something similar enough to that kind of a return. No, there's no doubt about it. Some his performances this year, no matter what, when Galway needed anything, it had to be Cathal Mannion, like so. And then when you look into the other games, then the likes of some of the Cork forwards, yeah, okay, fair enough. They got to another final and they looked electric at times, but in genuine games where Galway needed scores to be got, Cathal Mannion pulled it out all the time. Like so, for me, he's definitely a nailed on Ulster.
Yeah, as you mentioned, his form, 50 points in 3 games. Even again yesterday, Haskell won at 25 points to 211 winners over Porty Pierces. Uh, the most impressive thing about a Haskell is just their manner really to blow teams away in the Senior B Championship so far.
Yeah, that's to be putting up those scores, and for Pierce's it was a good chance to come in and see exactly where they are. They've had a good campaign as well too. They've racked up their wins, got themselves qualified. It's still there. You have Emmett Ward there still battling away for them, and but for to be able to pull out those kind of scores and put in those performances where you're going a little bit to the pin of your collar, but you're comfortable and you're coming out of them. It's definitely going to give them great confidence. Again, a team that's kind of been up and down. They've tasted a bit of relegation battles. They contested a Senior B final as well with Mulla. Um, so they're again with the restructuring of the championship, they're probably saying to themselves, okay, we've them couple of guys back, hit a little bit of form, and get ourselves going and get the momentum going that they'll know that they got to that replay with Mulla and went very, very close to getting up. Um, that they'll be well able to back themselves, and of course with the quality they have, that will be the difference, like down the line.
The other game in that group, Portumna 228, Mulla 29 points. Declan McLaughlin's goal laid on, sealing a 5 point win for Portumna. We all knew what was at stake in this one at the weekend. It was a winner takes all, really, and Portumna, I suppose, getting that goal laid on and sealing their place into the quarterfinals.
Was a huge scoring from Mulla as well too, like so it's tough, but that's the real kind of real hurling there. Like that's that there's no fancy stuff there. There's nothing. There's no point looking out at the crowds. It's a real battle, and I suppose Portumna again had that little bit of quality again. You have Joe Kenning still backing it all up there with them as well, and with Loughlin's goal, and yeah, they'll be glad that they've held on and they've qualified. Probably be tough ask, I would imagine, for them with Ballinderry in that quarter final. Like, but still, you don't know Portumna. They have Joe. Anything can happen on a day with them as well too. Like so, you wouldn't be surprised at the same time they contested that final last year. So they're going to be thereabouts as well too. Once you have them beaten, you'll have it all done.
Yeah, Pierces and Mellows too in the other quarterfinal then.
Tight game. Tight game. Both had good campaigns. I saw Mellows with Teen Abbey and physically very strong. A good tight group, playing very, very well. Obviously, a lot of that core team, Sean Morrissey, Adrian Morrissey, Conor Kavanagh still there. And obviously Ty Hearn, getting line ball over the bar yesterday. And they just have that experience of the big day, and they won't fear Porry Pierce's one. If they were to get through that, they won't fear. meeting Leitrim Kildima, meeting anybody else for that matter, um, or the in the semi-final. So no, they just have that experience of the big games, and they'll relish a battle, and they'll relish a crunch match in a tight pitch in a month's time in poor weather. They won't be afraid of anybody.
Looking then at the intermediate hurling championship, so for a lot of the intermediate clubs, it was nearly about Premier Intermediate status for next year. So from Group 1, Skahana, Montbellew and Meath Aircourt have secured their place into the Premier Intermediate Hurling Championship. Ceylon miss out, so they're going to be a Premier Junior club regardless what happens for the rest of the championship. And Athenry, they'll go into the Reeves Cup next year with most of the clubs. That's going to be a competition basically for club second teams
Yeah.
next year. But Meath Aircourt 125, Ceylon 213. I was actually at this one, Andy, and just for Ceylon, they couldn't get their hands on John Fleming at all in this one. And he was in top form. He played wing forward, and if he wasn't getting the scores, he was getting a touch for most of the scores. James Downey too. He actually played centre half back. Got some really impressive long range frees. Earner too on the edge of the square. Impressive, and it was a really impressive performance by Mealy Kirkcourt at the weekend.
I suppose Ceylon was always going to come out battling anyway. I know they have,
Yeah.
they've bit the bullet, and but they had to come out swinging, regardless. But for I suppose John Flynn, you'd expect him to be doing that kind of a performance, to be honest, with you, because he's been at that high level. He's played down in Northern Park this year in Championship hurling,
Mm.
so he should be able to kind of stand out and dominate that Ceylon team, who are they're no shrinking violet either. They've contested semi-finals going back very, very recently, two semi-finals, and well able to go. And again, results went against them earlier on in the championship. That means they're heading where they are. But like, I suppose it's to be expected for or for Meath Court that they're really going to be at the business end of it anyway, as they have been for the last number of years, and they look to kind of consolidate their position as a strong intermediate team. And as I kind of said to you off earlier on, like with the reformers of the championship this time next year, they're only going to be one step away from senior hurling again next year. That with senior B being eliminated, and they're a very strong intermediate team, Mealy Court. And I suppose any of the teams that's going about to drop from senior B right now, outside of the winners, um, they won't overly panic about them too much. The likes of Beha and those guys, they're on a good run as well at the minute. So they're not going to be bothered about teams that are about to drop down from senior B, because you know one good battle in a good championship and intermediate next year will, again, like I said, you're just that step away from senior.
Yeah, Scahan Montbellew too in the other game, comfortable over Athenry. Athenry had ultimately nothing to play for there at the weekend. But for Scahan Montbellew, my law, finish on 5 points, top the group and straight into a quarter final.
Yeah, and that's it. Like Sean McDonough coming in there with 3 goals as well yesterday. Like, so, look at they're a coming team. They got over that hurdle of that junior championship a couple of years back with Niall Healy, and they're looking to build that momentum. And there's your argument again, the likes that we had earlier on about Mike Cullen. That magical line that's going from Clifton to Ballinasloe, and everything above it is football and that. But those little pockets of areas where hurling is strong, they're a good combination. Obviously, a big area that they're pulling in players from. Like, but they're continuing on that development that they have, and it's good to see Sean McDonough as well to kind of come back to form, and a highly rated minor a couple of years back. Like, so to get 3 goals as well for him is good to see him.
Yeah, Group 2 then, Carramore topped group 514 to 20-point winners over Craughwell. Took quite a sizable lead in this one. Craughwell, to their credit, fought back towards the end. They're in an under 20 A1 final this week as well, Carramore. So they've obviously building on this success and straight into a quarter. Weren't that far away from Teen Aberdeen last year either. So they feel like they're heading in the right direction anyways.
Oh, they are, yeah. Carmore, like again, they're on that border of football with Clare and Conor Flaherty. They had Danny Cummins there as well last year. They've a good mix of players. They've a big panel, a big pool, big area to pick from. So and traditionally Carmore were always very. I played against Carmore a lot of the time in the early noughties. They've always had those great players going back, Decky Walsh, all those obviously those players that played in those the county finals in the mid 90s as well too, the likes of Rory Kenny. So they've gone down the grades, but they held on for a long, long time before they did get relegated a couple of years back. Like, so, look, it's good to see them back up again.
Yeah, Clymer just pipping Abbey Knockmoy, and it would have been interesting there if Abbey Knockmoy were to beat them. They would have got the Premier Intermediate because they would have had the head-to-head
Yeah.
on Craughwell for it to be decided like that. So that was just one of the most tight games. There was Clymer 120, Abbey Knockmoy 216 at the weekend.
Yeah, and Clymer contested it, and won, lost and won county finals in
Yeah.
intermediate grade, and then going back 4 or 5 years ago. So they were happy. I saw Jack Amara as well. Fantastic block at the very end of the game there. It was on before the start of his Capitagle game Saturday evening. It's unfortunate for Abbey Knockmoy, again, traditionally, a very, very good team, hard as nails, tough to beat, um, and hard going for those guys, to see them kind of dropping down to Premier Junior next year. Like, so but look, it's a chance probably to go back down to that grade, regroup. I know that nobody be saying they wanted to go down there, but it's not necessarily the end of the world. Again, like I said, no more than earlier on, intermediate is only one step away from senior, Premier Junior is one step away from back up to intermediate. So, back down, regroup, and they have no choice either. They have to get on with it. So, and they will do that. They're not going to go down there and wallow. They're going to go down there and say, right, we got to get out of this place. So, because Abbey will dust themselves off and get themselves going again next January.
It was interesting looking at the permutations for Group Three, who was going to top it at the weekend. You looked at the results. Ballygare 423 added down 8 points. Kinvaradine 20, Cambridge 115. I'm sure if you said to Kinvara during the week you'll score 920 and you don't top the
They
group,
still
like
won't top the
it's
group, yeah. And it was only by 1 point then as well in the end that they
yeah.
managed to be out of line. Like, so yeah, look at Kinvara again, they won't be overly too upset about not hitting the top spot. They have the quality there again, the very, very young team. They have the experience of Conor Whelan. I think did he get 4 goals, I think, on in that game. And Luca Danju, Ty Heavey, all those guys. And they have the experience as well too of getting to that final last year. So they won't overly lose sleep about anybody, regardless of whether they came out first or second in that. And in Ballygar as well too, no more than Skahana Mount Ballymallock, they've got that junior win the last couple of years, and again, it's good progression for them that they're topping that group, and they're putting up such scores, big scores, like 423 is serious scoring. Like, I know Annadown obviously had very, very little to play for, but still, you have the capabilities of doing that sort of damage. You're going in the right direction.
With Ballygare, obviously they got to the Division Two league final, and there's probably a bit of pressure coming in this year to see could they continue their league form, but they've done that and straight into a quarter final.
Yeah, it's again, like I said, it's their progression. A good league win as well too, and beat Lintrum Kildima along that way as well too, who are going very, very well in Senior B. Like, so, they'll be very happy to have edged up, and I think there was a lot of happy supporters as well too yesterday once they got that win.
Just looking at Group Four, Andy, I think it is one of the standout results. Kilbeggan the eight, Turlough seven. It was difficult conditions, considered by the scoreline. But for Kilbeggan, they've had a lot of challenges and difficult times as a club, and they're into the knockout stages now. There won't be a Premier Intermediate club, but for them to get a positive result like this, it's huge for them.
It is like I suppose, difficult group now again, and a little bit more difficult for me too, kind of being pitted against their allies really at underage with Beha. Probably would have it was a tough ask kind of to expect them to get one over as well too on Rahon Newcastle, who would be that little bit stronger as well too. And at that point with the two losses, and again with the results against Turlough Moore pretty much being ineffective as regards the championship next year, because that's Turlough Moore dropping anyway because they have a second team. Um, yeah, it was a big ask for Kilbacon anyway. Yeah, but it's been well documented, I suppose, over the years, this and that about them, and yeah, they've had the player drain and stuff. But look, at they've got the facilities, no more than like we said about Abenakmai. They're down there now. There's no point wallowing about it for any longer, or talking about it. Um, the task for them now is to regroup and get everyone back and have a real cut at it, as it was said last week. Kiltormer bit the bullet and dropped last year as well too, and they have a very, very good championship run so far this year as well too in junior. So look at yeah, you can look at it half full, half empty, and all that, but they have no choice now. So there's no point going on about it at this stage anymore. Just get themselves going and look forward to next year.
Yeah, Stephen Lambert with 7 of their 8 points for
Yeah,
Kilbacon, there to weekend. Beha and Rahu Newcastle. Do you feel Beha can have a real go at going all the way here this year?
definitely. Definitely, yeah. And look at it, they wouldn't have wanted to make the drop last year either from senior B down to intermediate. Like, but they're well equipped. Obviously, they've Adrian too. His quality there. They've They've all those players. They have Dahi Keane. He's really, really good forward. Obviously, Evan Hunt has great experience as well, Galway underage teams. And again, the evergreen Joe Gentley, once you get any defender on him in intermediate championship, no matter who he is or what level he's at or age or any category you want to pull out, Joe Gentley is still one of the best forwards that's in Galway in any level. Um, so once you kind of have that quality, you'd have to say, looking up through the groups and the other teams that are still in the intermediate championship, that Beha will have to have a big say, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so Beha go straight on to the quarterfinal there, as I mentioned. But the preliminary quarterfinal draw is Kinvara, Kilbacon, Meath Aircourt, Clanbridge, Clymer, Ceylon, and Rahu, Newcastle, and Craughwell in the preliminary quarterfinals there. But that's all we do have time for on today's show. Andy Coen, thanks very much for coming on to this week's podcast.
Thanks, Paul.